Call 1-800-367-7960 toll-free, and it will be delivered discreetly to your home. Get results using the safe, all-natural alternative, Enerx.
This is CNN.
I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington, just ahead of Crossfire Town meeting at George Washington University. But first, the latest on America's new war. The fallout over Tuesday's terrorist attacks against the United States hits hard on Wall Street. Jittery investors send stocks plunging. The Dow dropped nearly 700 points, its biggest ever one-day point drop. Airline stocks are hit especially hard, and the troubling industry faces big layoffs. U.S. Airways announced 11,000 layoffs today. Continental already has announced 12,000 layoffs, and other major carriers are expected to follow suit. Experts say a fear of flying is playing a role in the airline's troubles. President Bush received a rousing welcome at the Pentagon today. He was there to attend a meeting with defense officials. Mr. Bush reiterated that Osama bin Laden is the prime suspect in Tuesday's terrorist attacks, and the president says he wants justice. And in Afghanistan, a Pakistani delegation delivers a stark ultimatum from the United States. Hand over Osama bin Laden or expect to be attacked. Afghanistan's Taliban leaders plan to convene an Islamic Council tomorrow to determine what, if anything, to do with bin Laden. America's favorite pastime, meanwhile, is back in full swing. In just a few minutes, the first pitch in Philadelphia, the U.S. cradle of liberty, where the Phillies host the Atlanta Braves. It's one of the first games being played tonight since last week's terrorist attacks. Let's listen in to some of the pre-game ceremonies now underway in Philadelphia.
Comfortable with dealing with all that. We have the unenviable task of being the first sporting event that's going to be played in New York City. So
here we are in Pittsburgh.
There's a lot on our plate right now on an emotional level that we're trying to sift through and deal with. But hopefully these 4 days here in Philadelphia will give us an opportunity to kind of get back into the routine and figure out exactly what changes, if any, are going to be made and give us some time to think about.
All right, let's go to Pittsburgh, where the New York Mets are playing the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can see the stadium in Pittsburgh, where they're getting ready for some pre-game activities. Most of the players are wearing symbols of the terrorist actions last week. Fire department symbols, American flags all over the stadium.
One of the things you'll see tonight, the I Love New York pins, which are being worn by many of the Pittsburgh Pirates staff.
And as many of our baseball fans know, that this game was originally scheduled to be played in New York tonight, but it was moved to Pittsburgh because of the disaster in New York City.
O God of all nations, creator and upholder of every person on earth, accept this prayer from our many hearts now joined as one. In this time of loss and atrocity in our country, we seek the help, the strength, and the understanding that only you can give. In sorrow, we remember the lives of so many of our fellow citizens who perished in the cruel violence that overtook New York City, Washington, D.C., and our own nearby Somerset County. We know that you love them and that you hold them in the palm of your hand. In amazement and gratitude, we are also united and mindful of the countless generosity and brave men and women who are giving of themselves in the emergency response to this calamity. Keep them from all harm and be their special strength in their difficult work. In our grave circumstances, we seek your deepest wisdom to guide our leaders in the response that our nation must make. Point out the path that will really lead to a world of security peace, happiness for all. May we never be so overwhelmed by evil that we become less than we are called to be. May we always be guided by love and respect. And finally, Lord, be near to all the families and communities in this Pittsburgh area to fill our hearts with hope, generosity, and mutual respect. We honor you, God of goodness, who lives and reigns forever and ever. Would you please remain standing for a moment of silence?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you remain standing. Presenting the colors are officers from the State Correctional Institute at Pittsburgh. And to honor America with our national anthem and God Bless America, we ask that everyone join in the singing as Staff Sergeant Brenton Black and Master Sergeant Kathleen Snow, both of the Air Force Reserve 911 Airlift Wing, lead us first with the Star-Spangled Banner.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America. beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
And let's go to Philadelphia now, where the Atlanta Braves are playing the Philadelphia Phillies.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing and help us to continue to honor the United States of America. Please join the Valley Forge Chorus under the direction of Gene Bender in singing our national anthem.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
The pregame activities in Philadelphia, the game involving the Atlanta Braves and the Philadelphia Phillies. And one note, that game moved from Shea Stadium in New York, the New York Mets, to Pittsburgh to play the Pittsburgh Pirates. One of the reasons it was moved, Shea Stadium in Queens in New York, being used as a staging area for relief efforts for those firefighters and others engaged in the rescue operation down in lower Manhattan. We'll continue to monitor all of this and all of the latest developments, but for now, I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. Remember, breaking news anytime here on CNN. Up next, a special Crossfire Town meeting live from George Washington University here in Washington.
Have you gotten yourself into too much credit card debt? You may be able to point and click your way out with a second mortgage from Ditech.com. Whether you have equity or no equity, Ditech has a second mortgage with a no closing cost option that may help lower your monthly payments. Why pay minimum monthly payments when you can pay off your high interest debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? For fast, friendly service, apply online or call us at 1-800-71-FIX now.
Want a job that makes you happy? Post your resume now. Monster.com.
You the monster.
Point. Shoot. Create. The HP Pavilion 7970 with the Intel Pentium 4 processor. How will you use it? save up to $250 by mail on the HP Digital Photography Studio.
If you are seeking someone you believe to be missing from the attack on the World Trade Center or the Pentagon, log on to cnn.com/missing to submit a photograph and description. Please include your contact information.
As the story continues to unfold, join Aaron Brown every weeknight at 10 for the latest developments and in-depth coverage of America's new war. A CNN special report with Aaron Brown every weeknight at 10 Eastern on CNN.
Welcome to this special Crossfire Town Meeting live from the campus of the George Washington University in downtown Washington, D.C. Tonight, Americans all, we suffer and struggle together. Never in our history have we experienced anything so tragic or so troubling. And in these terrible days following last week's attacks on the United States, every American has something to say, and every American has lots of questions. So all this week, we're going to be here at GW with a live audience and a panel of experts to discuss and debate how America should respond to terrorism. How could it happen here? Are we now safe? Are we in fact at war? If so, against whom? And what does it mean for us?
And here to help us understand the last week and the days ahead, James Woolsey, who's the former CIA director, Senator George Allen of Virginia, member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, James Lee Witt, former director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and Robin Wright, reporter for the Los Angeles Times, who's also written a number of books on terrorism in the Middle East.
And of course, we want to welcome the great students from the great campus of GW University. Thank you. Senator Allen, I want to ask you the question I think that every American wants to know. We are the greatest nation on earth. We are the most powerful nation on earth. We have the biggest military with the biggest weapons, and yet 19 men were able to penetrate this country, take over 4 airplanes, destroy some of our major institutions, killed maybe 5,000 Americans, and bring this country to a halt. How could that ever happen without our not knowing anything about it?
Well, it did. I think that our intelligence agencies, international, had some ideas that had threats, knew about it. I think some of these ideas and threats were known. They weren't acted on. I don't think anybody even imagined, though, something like this happening. There have been threats over many, many years. Clearly, we've been violated. We're not impervious to these attacks. We thought suicide bombings were something that happened maybe in Israel or happened in Europe, but it's happened here, and no one had ever contemplated such a vicious, callous, heartless attack on innocent, unarmed people. And so we've learned from it. I don't blame our intelligence agencies or our law enforcement agencies. They all do the best job they can. We need to learn from it, learn how we can prevent this from occurring again. Insofar as airlines are concerned, we need to make sure that no airplane ever gets taken over again and used as a missile. Our pilots need to be made more safe in the cockpit. It needs to be like a vault. No one can get in. We ought to use technology where there's a button where if there's an attack or something amiss, that gives a signal to FAA and they just automatically fly that plane and land it. And there are things we need to learn from it, but I think there's a great unity, a great coalescing, and a resolve to make this country safer, but also stick to our principles and our liberties, and also seek justice. And the justice needs to be sure, and it needs to be very swift and severe.
Now, Mr. Woolsey, if, as the Senator said, we're going to learn from this, we have to know how it happened. Now, 2 of the suspected terrorists, the hijackers, apparently were on a list of suspected terrorists, and yet they moved freely around the country on valid visas, apparently. They bought tickets in their own names for these flights. Specifically, where did the chain of intelligence and law enforcement break here?
It's hard to say on different things that happened in different ways. Some of these people got into the country on visas. The State Department people who process visas are few in number and overworked. People do get in. The blind Sheikh Omar, got into the United States on a visa when he shouldn't have some years ago, who was involved in the bombings in New York in the early 90s. The CIA picked up something about 2 of these men meeting with someone related to bin Laden, and that information went through the system, but is winding its way through the law enforcement system. It never got to the right people at the right time. The CIA was operating under some constraints overseas that I think were unwisely imposed in 1995 by the Clinton administration, and I hope some of those are going to get fixed. The FBI's guidelines are confusing and vague. We said last year on a terrorism commission I was on, those need to have been scrubbed and changed, and they were not. Airport security was lax. The fighter aircraft that were to defend the country itself, there were only 20 of them on alert in the whole country, and none was really close to Washington or New York. There are a lot of things that different parts of the government were not looking at and not doing that if anyone had foreseen this certainly would have been done differently.
Robin Wright, you've written one of the best books on terrorism, Sacred Rage. You were in Afghanistan last year. You know sort of inside the terrorist mind. These 19 men were not alone. There must be others in this country. They're not finished with their war against the United States yet. What could we expect next? Where do they go next?
Well, one of the things that's most difficult in this war of terrorism that we've launched is the fact that they're not just in the United States, but they're in 35 countries, including several that are allies of the United States. So it's a war that unlike anything we've waged in the past, really has no front line. It's a war fighting in the shadows, wondering about the people next to us. Yes, they probably do have operatives and sympathizers still in this country. They are the product of 2 different phenomena. One is the emergence of this hatred of the United States for its involvement in its policies in the Middle East, but at a broader level, they've emerged because most of the Muslim world, the largest bloc being in the Arab world, is also the last bloc of countries to hold out against democracy. And in the frustration over the last 25 years as the rest of the world has moved toward democracy and freedoms, these countries haven't. And as a result, people have turned, because all opposition is exiled or imprisoned or banned, to Islam because it's the only alternative. And so you have the emergence of a political movement that then moves into a political extreme.
That's the background. I agree with you. But like, what could we expect next as Americans? What should we be on our guard against? More planes used as suicide bombings? Or where do you think they go next in this war?
Having covered terrorism for 20 years in Beirut and other places, it's quite clear that they have, in every juncture, outsmarted us. And if you're trying to figure out what are the options out there, there are obviously concerns that everyone's expressed for the last decade, the U.S. intelligence community, and chemical and biological weapons. Those are things. But I would be very surprised to see the use of aviation again. The lockdown we will have on pilots, airports, will make it very difficult for them to act, and they'll look for alternatives.
But, Mr. Wright, let's suppose that they did act. For the sake of argument, let's say that terrorists did somehow introduce a biological or chemical agent into a city, anthrax, something horrible like that. You were head of FEMA for many years, obviously an agency that responds to disasters like that, were they to occur. How ready is the United States for a biological or chemical attack?
Well, Tucker, I think they're as ready as they can be as far as planning and implementing the plan. But the problem that we face here in the United States is that you have the first responders, the firefighters, the police officers at the local level who are the frontline defense in an event like this. And Congress last year gave FEMA $100 million to provide grants to local fire departments to bring them up to a little bit higher level. But you know what the request was, the need was? $3 billion. So there's got to be some funding, and there's got to be some equipping of these first responders that's on the front line.
And yet you say that if there were a biological or chemical attack tomorrow, you think the United States is fairly well prepared to deal with it?
We have the plan, and we have exercised the plan, but we're still not equipped to respond to that type of event.
I want to remind our panelists to signal to us anytime you want to add something that any one of the other panelists has to say. But I want to come to you, Jim Woolsey. Are we at war? Is this a war that we have launched? And if so, Yes or no, and against whom?
It was launched against us, and yes, I think we have effectively, Congress is not in so many words, but effectively declared that we are at war. But unlike the morning of December 7th, 1941, when you could look at the red suns on the wings of the Japanese aircraft and tell who you were at war with, now you really can't. There's strong indications that Osama bin Laden's organization was involved with this. Perhaps other terrorist groups in his ambit are affiliated. I retain some suspicions that there may have been some state intelligence services involved. Certainly Afghanistan, not having an intelligence service, but Afghanistan's giving aid to bin Laden by letting him stay there. But one, I think, wants to at least look at the possibility that states such as Iraq over the years may have been involved in some of these acts against us. But the government, the U.S. government really doesn't know yet, and one of the first things to do is to go back over earlier terrorist incidents, look at everything carefully with a fine-tooth comb, and see how we can get it sorted out. There may be more involved here than just a single terrorist group.
Well, I think most indications are that there's more than just one. The aid and comfort, the financing, the harboring, the assistance is more than just one country. And I am confident as this is all being recreated, even the evidence that we've seen that has been declassified, that's been on CNN, where you know all this information about these 19 individuals, it's all getting tracked back to a variety of places. But that's where this war is going to have to be fought. It's going to need to be fought, obviously, against the heads of these terrorist organizations. They need to be knocked out. But also punished are those who finance and support and harbor them. And some of the leaders of these countries are in a pretty tough position because there are a lot of people in those countries, as Robin was saying, who actually don't like the concepts of freedom and liberty and freedom of expression and beliefs that we have in this country. And for countries such as Egypt, Pakistan, for example, the leaders can be very moderate, same with the king in Jordan, but there are a lot of folks who don't share those views. Look what happened to President Sadat for being relatively moderate insofar as Israel is
Well, what does that mean,
concerned.
Senator, that we're going to declare war on Egypt? Or I mean,
No.
the Philippines apparently has one of a bin Laden offshoot in
but
it.
that doesn't mean that the Philippine government or the Egyptian government or the Pakistani government or the Jordanian government, what any of them are actually financing them or supporting them. Now, for those governments that are actually somehow helping them out with law enforcement, with intelligence, with communications, I think we're going to have to crack down on those who are hiding the funds that are getting around, because this was a very effective, I hate to say anything positive about it, but it was well orchestrated, well organized, and obviously planned for many, many years. This wasn't a spontaneous gang huddling together and say, hey, let's do this. This was done for years, including getting them trained here in this country.
I see both of you want to say something. Robin, go first.
No, I was just going to say 2 points on Jim's accusation about the Iraqis. This operation was far more sophisticated than anything bin Laden and his lieutenants have ever carried out before, in terms of having people who are well-educated, trained, and penetrating the United States and trained there. At the same time, Saddam Hussein has a dread fear of Islamic extremism himself, and the differences between Afghanistan and Iraq, the logistics of coordination are awfully difficult.
It's possible, but
Jamie?
Yeah, I think it's very important for people to understand that, you know, FEMA's responsibility and the FBI's responsibility and crisis management and consequence management. And the FBI has a lead responsibility to the response of an event. But the key is for the CIA and the FBI to have the capability to prevent it from ever happening in the first place. But if it does happen, like this event, then we need to make sure that the people on the ground have the capability to respond to meet that threat and be able to take care of people. If you have a biological, chemical type event, then it may be 3 or 4 days before you know what it is.
Right.
And it may be spread everywhere. So it's important to do the prevention up front before it ever happens. And that's what is important that the Senator and Robin is talking about.
Can I ask Robin a question from her?
I'll tell you what, we're going to take a break. Save your question.
Certainly will.
We got lots more questions coming up.
Back in just a minute, we'll take our questions to the audience, our student panel here, the audience at George Washington University. We'll be right back with our Crossfire special town meeting.
Closed captioning for this program has been provided by Verizon Communications.
The search for life and loved ones continues as President Bush promises victory against terrorism. For complete coverage, stay with CNN.
Upgrade to America's Top 150 package and take off with Great American Country and Dish Network. You'll receive the Top 150's latest programming edition, Great American Country, the newest 24-hour country music channel, bringing you your favorite superstars, classic artists, and new talent. You'll also be automatically entered to win a trip for two to Nashville. Call 1-800-333-DISH to upgrade today and get more music, better country from Great American Country and Dish Network. Call 1-800-333-DISH now.
An ordinary town.
You're not that Wilson is a fortune teller, are you?
An ordinary woman.
I don't call myself that. You think we'll live happily ever after?
An extraordinary gift.
You see something bad?
On pay-per-view comes the heart-stopping thriller of a deadly mystery.
Messing with the devil's gonna get you burned.
And one woman with the ability to uncover the truth.
Somebody's gonna try and kill me.
The Gift. Rated R. Playing on pay-per-view.
This is CNN.
Hello, I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. Here's the latest news. Stocks plunge at the start and never recover. The Dow loses nearly 700 points, the biggest single-day point loss ever. Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill tells CNN's Lou Dobbs there's no need for panic.
The crops are still growing in the fields, and the people are still showing up in the factories, and the shopkeepers are out there. Even here in Midtown New York, you can begin to feel a quickening pace again. We'll get our act together. We're going to be okay.
Despite today's financial losses, President Bush says he has great faith in the U.S. economy. Earlier in a visit to the Pentagon, he said the resolve of the armed forces has never been stronger. CNN senior White House correspondent John King has more.
Rallying the troops at the Pentagon and talking tough at the mention of Osama bin Laden.
You want bin Laden dead? I want him held. I want justice. And there's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said "Wanted, dead or alive."
More tough talk at the White House. Current U.S. law forbids assassinations, but the president's spokesman pointedly noted there are exceptions.
The executive order does not limit the United States' ability to act in self-defense.
And is going after bin Laden in an act of self-defense.
I'm not going to define all the steps that may or may not be taken.
This Pentagon meeting dealt with the coming call-up of National Guard and Reserve forces. And key advisors were at the White House earlier in the day to discuss a menu of military options that includes sending elite infantry troops into Afghanistan. U.S. officials reported progress on the diplomatic front. Sources tell CNN Pakistan, Russia, and India are among the nations sharing their intelligence on the bin Laden organization. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates promised to scale back ties with Afghanistan's ruling Taliban. And French President Jacques Chirac and the British Prime Minister Tony Blair agreed to come to Washington this week to plot strategy. The White House said the rocky first day back on Wall Street was to be expected, but there was a sense of urgency as the president huddled with top economic advisors to discuss a multi-billion-dollar emergency aid package to the airline industry and an emergency mix of new spending and a capital gains tax cut to help Wall Street and the broader economy.
I'm confident we can work with Congress to come up with an economic stimulus package, if need be, that will send a clear signal to the risk takers and capital formators of our country that the government's going to act too.
Senior aides describe the president as a bit tired and sometimes frustrated as he deals with the twin challenges posed by last week's terrorist attacks. Planning a military campaign, aides say, will be anything but conventional, and trying to keep an economy that already was struggling from sliding into recession. John King, CNN, the White House.
In Afghanistan, an Islamic Council is to meet tomorrow to decide what to do about the U.S. demand to turn over Osama bin Laden. The United Nations reports tens of thousands of Afghan refugees are streaming toward Iran and Pakistan in fear of possible military strikes. In New York, no new survivors were found today at Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan. Mayor Giuliani says the search will continue until hope is lost. And speaking of hope, here's a hopeful sign. Major League Baseball is back As 12 teams take to the field tonight, fans are combining love of the game with their love of country. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. I'll be back at the top of the hour with a look at military options facing the United States. Now back to our Crossfire town meeting at George Washington University here in the nation's capital.
Welcome back to our special Crossfire Town meeting here at George Washington University. With our studio audience and our panel of experts, we're debating and discussing how America responds to terrorism. Here with Tucker Carlson. Tucker,
thank you, Bill.
First question from our group.
No trouble rustling up questions from this group. This is Javier Martinez from Phoenix, Arizona. What's your question?
What I want to know is what is being done to protect the Arab Americans within the United States?
Senator Allen, what is being done?
I think people are on heightened alert in a lot of different ways in this country, worried about terrorist threats and so forth. I think it's incumbent on all leaders, whether it's the president, whether it's the senator, whether it's a local sheriff, to understand that what makes America great and unique is that a government has been instituted two centuries ago to protect individual rights. And while we're fighting this terrorist threat, there's no reason, and in fact we cannot abrogate basic human rights, whether that's freedom of expression, the writ of habeas corpus being available, no unwarranted searches and seizures, and you don't discriminate against people because of their ethnic origin, their religious beliefs. And so there have been a few unfortunate and terrible attacks on people of Arab descent. And everywhere I've seen, there's been outrage over it. And so we do need to make sure that there is protection. I spoke to a family who lives relatively nearby me of Islamic descent. I'm not going to say which country they're from, but Muslims. And if you talk to those youngsters and see how they feel they're first and foremost American citizens, regardless of their ethnicity. They feel as bad as anybody who may be from Ireland or France or Japan or Korea or Mexico or anywhere else. They feel violated. We need to understand that all Americans share this grief, and there's no reason, in fact we have to be on heightened alert, that we don't have any of these malicious attacks on persons or their facilities, their places of worship or businesses.
Robin, I see you want to follow up, and I want to ask you, I mean, are there religious roots to these acts of terrorism?
Absolutely not. There's nothing in Islam, in the same way there's nothing in Christianity or Judaism that encourages suicide actions or the killing of innocents. I think the President actually took a very important step today by going to a mosque, trying to make sure that everyone understands this is not a war against Arabs or Muslims, but it's a war between civilization and terrorists.
I see. Jim, let me get a question for you, okay? And then we'll get you in the...
Go
ahead.
If I could,
real quickly, sure.
Not only is it terribly wrong for Americans to discriminate against and attack Arab Americans or Muslims, it is incredibly stupid, because if the FBI is going to have... And it's dangerous. If the FBI is going to have any opportunity in rooting out some of the people who may be here that are still terrorists, they're going to need the cooperation of the Muslim American community, the Arab American community. And no one is doing more damage to the fight against terrorism than the idiots who are persecuting American Muslims and Arab Americans.
And this is Mark from San Francisco. Mark.
I've been hearing the phrase "war against terrorism" used a lot in the last last week, and I was wondering. I can't help but think that's very similar to the phrase "war on drugs" that was declared in the late '80s. And I was wondering, what are the differences between the war on drugs and the war on terrorism, so we don't lose this war on terrorism?
James Lee Witt, you want to tackle that?
Well, I think there's a lot of difference between the war on drugs and war on terrorism. I mean, you physically have a threat to our freedom, and it's a serious threat. And I think, to follow up too, and the question was asked a while ago, I think every person has value, and every person should be respected. And that's what we're all about in America. And, you know, every person we do not want to give up our freedom. So the war on terrorism is different than the war on drugs, totally different. It's a threat against our freedom. And that's why it's so important that we win this war.
The war on drugs and the war on terrorism have some analogies, and I think that our law enforcement, our military, and our intelligence folks ought to be given the same tools that our law enforcement are given on the war on drugs. The war on drugs is very difficult, and obviously it comes from a lot of places in our streets, and maybe it's not quite as direct, obviously, as bombing of the World Trade Centers or the Pentagon. But you know what? In infiltrating and fighting the war on drugs, one of the ways you do it is you have to infiltrate these groups. You have to pay informants. You need to make undercover drug buys. You need surveillance. Those same tactics as law enforcement or intelligence efforts have to be utilized here on the war on terrorists. It cannot be done from only satellites. We do need to pay informants, and the director well knows that there are prohibitions on us paying informants or putting under hire those who have been convicted of certain crimes. Well, you know, when you're dealing with a bunch of sharks, sometimes you have to use sharks to attract them and cut up those sharks for bait and bring them in. You're not dealing with the most savory folks. These are not choir boys that you're dealing with. So we ought to allow our law enforcement, whether external or internal, or, you know, I'm talking FBI or whether most likely the CIA, to hire on some of these other folks that are in that nest of scorpions to help us find out who's at risk to our country. That is done on the war on drugs. We need to take those handcuffs off our law enforcement and intelligence so they can better protect us as well as themselves.
Sharks and scorpion. Thank you, Senator. This is Christina Pentek from Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Christina, what's your question?
Hi, I was wondering about the implicit risks in attacking countries that support terrorism and feeding the flame in terrorism by doing so.
Now, Robin Wright, you were just in Afghanistan last year. Paint a word picture for us. What it would mean to send ground troops into Afghanistan? What do you think that would, what sort of repercussions that would have?
You know, it strikes me that Somalia and Beirut and Vietnam all look easy by comparison. This is a society without infrastructure. There are not roads to travel on. The logistical difficulties in some kind of military operation in Afghanistan are really unprecedented. And I think you point out a very important issue. How we conduct this war will be critical in determining whether we actually eliminate the whole phenomena or just a group of people, and in danger producing even more, we end up prolonging the war as a result.
We have a question here from Tabitha. Tabitha's from Williamsburg, Virginia. Senator, a constituent of yours, so be careful.
It's Tabitha, but
Tabitha, I'm very sorry.
It's okay. I was wondering, what is the possibility that the Bush administration will dramatically change its foreign policy, considering we've been kind of awakened from a slumber?
Do you want to direct that to anyone particular?
Why not Senator Allen?
Why not?
You are from Williamsburg or James City County, right?
I'm from James City County. I've lived there all my life. It's nice. My parents voted for you.
Well, good. Thank you. Well, I think that the Bush foreign policy, obviously his focus, President Bush is very focused on rooting out terrorism. He is worried in what Robin was talking about is how are we going to procure this war, so to speak, and how we're going to be sure and making sure there's as little damage to those who are not guilty or complicit. There is also a concern that there are those terrorists still here in this country, and when we do strike, that there could be retaliation here, and it may not be taking over an airplane. It may be who knows what. But I think as far as our policy and the principles of this country, we're staying strong. There are those who say that we should back off our support for Israel. I say we stick with our friends. We stick with those who value freedom and democracy. We cannot be cowed by terrorists, and I think the Bush administration is as resolved as ever to keep their policy.
Let me ask you there. I mean, is it the question is, as I understand Tabitha's question, is our policy perhaps too one-sided in the Middle East so that we are generating hatred toward the United States?
Well, the United States historically has been, I think, fairly even-handed in the Middle East. We've supported Israel for years. Israel's a democracy over there, but we have made common cause with moderate Arab states. We tried for years to broker a settlement between Israel and the Palestinians. A very, very generous offer was made to Yasser Arafat last year by Barak. He turned it down. I don't regard our position in the Mideast as having been improperly in one direction or another. I think what has to happen is that the Bush administration needs, I think, to hear a message similar to what Mr. Carville said in the last election, but it's the regime's stupid rather than it's the economy. The problem is the regimes in the Mideast that support terrorism and give sustenance to it, whether it's the Taliban or Saddam Hussein or part of the Iranian regime, Syria. One needs to either get a change in posture of the regimes or change the regimes. Otherwise, you're just swatting mosquitoes to try to deal with malaria. You have to do something about the swamp. Bin Laden is a terrible, big, powerful, angry, evil mosquito, but he is just a mosquito. The problem is behind him. The problem is the people who support him.
Let's talk about what's being done to swat him. This is Scott Levy from Arlington Heights, Illinois.
Yeah, Director Woolsey or Senator Allen, we've heard a lot in recent weeks and months about the characterization of the intelligence community as a complete failure, be it the purchasing of information from our agents, or recent weeks we've seen, obviously the trade towers and a lack of knowledge about those incidents or their ability to take place. My question is, have we done anything, or can you enlighten us of activities in recent weeks that the intelligence community has taken to be proactive? How should we be confident in our intelligence community when it certainly seems that they have failed us in many different instances?
Well, Senator Allen made a very good point earlier that we have to be able to penetrate these terrorist groups overseas. And in 1995, I hasten to say, after I stepped down from the job, the CIA adopted some guidelines that make it difficult to penetrate terrorist groups because one is deterred, if one is a case officer, from recruiting a spy inside a group if that spy has some violence in his background. Well, that's like telling the FBI to penetrate the mafia, but you can't put any crooks on your payroll as informants. It's nuts. Hopefully that will change. The CIA actually overseas did a rather good job back in 1999 at blocking some terrorist incidents that were going to take place at the end of '99 for the year 2000. But the budgeteers in the executive branch, and possibly in the Congress later, but mainly in the executive branch, in our time-honored American fashion, as soon as Y2K was over, they dusted off their hands and said, well, the terrorism problem is solved, let's cut the budget. And so for the last year or two, the budget for counterterrorism work by the CIA has been down. That's two of the things that need to be changed.
All right, panelists, thank you. You're watching
one other thing.
Sorry, Senator.
I agree with everything he said. Do not blame these hardworking, dedicated individuals in law enforcement and also in intelligence overseas. They have very risky, dangerous jobs. And so I'm not going to blame them. They need more tools. They need to take those handcuffs off. In addition to the worries about biological terrorism, another one that we need to worry about is cyber terrorism. Again, that's something that could just really foul up not only transportation but finances and our power grids in this country.
Excellent.
So,
all right, members of the panel, we're going to take a
well.
break, and we'll be back soon with our Crossfire special town meeting, How America Responds to Terrorism, live from the campus of George Washington University. We'll be right back with more questions from our audience.
I remember 20 years ago how they turned the racing world upside down. First by introducing a race car with quattro all-wheel drive, and second by having a woman driving.
Time to join America Online.
Welcome. AOL is very easy to use.
Anyone can do it.
You've got mail. I love AOL email.
Click and send. Everybody I know is on AOL.
I do feel good knowing that AOL has parental controls.
I can get AOL anytime, anywhere.
And now with the all-new and improved AOL mobile communicator, you can send and receive email and instant messages without a computer. Every time I use AOL, I discover something new. Now's the perfect time to experience America Online. So easy to use, no wonder it's #1. Call 1-800-4ONLINE.
Real news. Real fast. Because your world has changed. Because your life has changed. And we understand that. A network that's accessible. We're always here when you need us. For the latest weather and travel updates, business and financial news,
sports scores and highlights,
technology, and the web.
Culture and entertainment. The new CNN Headline News.
Welcome back to Crossfire Special Town Meeting. We're here at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., talking about the tragic events of 6 days ago. With us, a terrific panel. Let me ask you, James Lee Witt, what can the average American do to protect him or herself from future terrorist attacks should they happen?
Well, I think the most important thing they can do, Tucker, is to sit down as a family and put a plan together that they could have as a family and knowing what to do if some type of an event happens. Because if you have children at school and both the parents are at work, then you need to, and if an event happens that disrupts that community, then they need to know of somebody's phone number, aunt or uncle or cousin in another state or out of that area, that they could all call just to say that we're okay. Because the fear of not knowing, it causes a lot of other people to get affected or hurt because they're very concerned about their family. And then also they can sit down and make sure that they have, if you're preparing for a hurricane or tornado or whatever it may be, make sure you have a kit in your home to be prepared. Those are just small things. Doesn't cost much at all. You can go to one of your local stores and buy what you need. And talk to your local emergency manager, your local fire chief, or your local police chief, and say, what will you do if this happens? How can we be prepared? And that's very important.
Thank you. James Lee Witt, former director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Question now for Jeff, Woodbury, New York. Correct, Jeff?
Correct.
You got the microphone.
My question is addressed to anybody. Accepting that there is a war and accepting that it could be very extensive with many countries involved, do I, as an 18-year-old American citizen, have to worry at all about the potential of some kind of a draft?
Well, Senator, that answer would be partly up to you. How do you answer that?
This was brought up. We had a briefing meeting today, and I don't see any reason for us to reinstitute the draft. What I do find interesting is how this tragedy has brought out the best in America, whether it's firefighters, rescue squad members, law enforcement, but a lot of folks actually enlisting, volunteering. And I like the approach of people volunteering. I see no reason to reinstitute the draft.
I'm sure that's good news to everybody here in this audience. Do you notice that I could feel the tension in the room when that question was asked. Justin has a question. Justin, where are you from?
I'm from Manhattan. Manhattan. I was born and raised in New York City. So, my question is for anyone on the panel. If we do take out Osama bin Laden, what happens if he's just a cell under somebody that we don't know? That there is even more of a hierarchy? And if that happens, what do we do then? Do we just continue going after everybody? This could be a never-ending process of going up. This is for anyone on the panel.
No, that question is directed at Robin Wright.
I think it's clear that Osama bin Laden is the Ford Foundation for Islamic extremists. He's the money bags. He makes it possible. But he has a network of lieutenants, and he has a network of wide cells. Yes, if we get Osama bin Laden, I actually think that's probably the easiest part of this war, as difficult as it's going to be. The much more difficult part is finding those cells that are penetrated in different parts of the world, tracking them, tracking their money links. One of the biggest part of this, and this gets to the question of the draft, it's not an army. This is not going to be a war with a lot of front lines. This is going to be an intelligence war, finding the assets, blocking the assets that make it possible for extremist groups to position people in foreign countries and pay for things like flight instruction.
But if you get Osama, does that necessarily solve the problem? Does that kill the network?
No, not at all. And I think that this network has been in place long enough, it is diverse enough, and it has enough connections to groups like Egypt's Islamic Jihad that it's a very wide war that we are about to wage.
Okay, we have a question from Andy Compton from Anchorage, Alaska.
I was wondering, in the recent weeks, we've finally found somewhat of a ceasefire in Israel, and I'm wondering if, after seeing videos of the Palestinians cheering in the street, if we need to worry about that just completely erupting again.
Mr. Woolsey, what do you make of those videos that apparently
Did you say a peace fire? What?
Ceasefire, I think.
A ceasefire.
Ceasefire, yes,
sorry,
sorry.
ceasefire. Well, not exactly a ceasefire. I mean, certainly not from the Israelis' point of view. I mean, I think that on this issue, we are really dealing with Yasser Arafat, someone who has shown himself, and those who are basically in power in the Palestinian Authority, has shown himself to really want to end the existence of the State of Israel. We hoped that what we had from 1993 until last summer was a Palestinian version of Sadat. If not quite as good as Sadat, at least something close enough that he would have gone along with a reasonable deal. He was offered an extraordinarily generous deal by Prime Minister Barak and rejected it and started killing Israeli women and children. And as far as I'm concerned, there wasn't a ceasefire. And I think a lot of Americans will increasingly, and I think sadly, begin to turn even further away than we have now from the prospect of trying to broker a peace in the Mideast by those pictures of the Palestinians dancing and cheering at the sight of 5,000 Americans dying.
Director, I'm going to interrupt because we just have about a minute left. This is Maeve from Pennington, New Jersey.
How can we fight terrorists within other countries without fighting the countries themselves?
I guess, Robin, you start that and we'll go around.
That's one of the great questions, and in fact, the problem is we are often going to have to get some of these cells, collaborate with governments who are engaged in gross human rights abuses themselves, which is one of the reasons that these extremists emerged in the first place. It's a vicious cycle to unravel.
Quick comment, Senator?
Well, in the event that the Taliban government in Afghanistan, Maeve, does not cooperate, we may be in an altercation with them. I'm not the commander-in-chief, but there's an example. There are other governments and other people in these other countries that are going to realize that it's in their own best interest not to be harboring these terrorists so that they can end up hopefully having a more prosperous, free life.
Okay, Senator, we're going to have to end it there, but happily we have an entire 4 more days of CNN Crossfire town meetings. I hope you will join us. Hope you all here in Washington, D.C. will join us. Tomorrow night we will have Dick Gephardt of the House of Representatives, Democratic leader.
We want to thank our guests, thank our panelists tonight. Thank you very much. Senator Allen, Robin Wright, James Lee Witt, and Jim Woolsey. Thanks our studio audience. A special Crossfire town meeting. We'll be back again tomorrow night from George Washington University. Good night. Thanks for joining us. Wolf Blitzer is next on CNN.
Good night.
Good night.
Closed captioning for this program has been provided by Verizon Communications.
For the latest developments as events unfold in America's new war, stay with CNN.
You know, most men get pretty shook up about losing their hair. But today, many of them are learning about Bosley Medical. They use your own living hair to fill in the thin spots. Just look at that. It really works. You can treat it like real hair because it is real hair. Your own naturally growing hair, so you don't have to worry about it.
Bosley Medical is the world's most experienced hair restoration practice. For over 25 years, they have performed more than 130,000 procedures using the innovative micrografting techniques pioneered by founder Dr. L. Lee Bosley.
Each surgeon at Bosley Medical is board certified and individually trained by me.
So if you want to have your own naturally growing hair back, call this number for more information. We'll send you this free video and in-depth guidebook that gives you the real facts about hair restoration. There's no cost and absolutely no obligation. So do it for yourself. Call now and get the real results you've been looking for.
It's your real hair.
You can't do better than real.
Are you one of the millions of American males who would like increased sexual energy? If you've been considering Viagra as a solution, consider something different. All-natural Enerx. Clinical studies show various ingredients of Enerx enhance sexual energy, increasing desire, performance, and satisfaction. Enerx is all natural with no side effects. With Enerx, you'll feel the increased energy within minutes and with no chemicals. We're so sure you and your mate will be completely satisfied. We'll offer you a 30-day, no questions asked, full refund. EnerX stimulates sexual energy by expanding the blood vessels, causing increased blood flow to specific areas of the body. Unleash the power of EnerX now.
Call 1-800-367-7960 toll-free, and it will be delivered discreetly to your home.